Hello, and once again, it's the Eat the Chalk podcast brought to you by the DFS headquarters. It is week 9 of the NFL season. I'm very happy we don't have to talk about the San Francisco 49ers mess right now. That's tonight's game. We are live on YouTube. Send us your questions, your comments. We are going to have a interesting giveaway today. Here's the deal, though. We're not just going to give it away. We're not going to tell you just how to do it right now. DM either myself or Nick. And we will, and our Twitter is right there on the screen there, and we will get you a really cool deal on how to join the DFS headquarters. It is that one-stop shop, all sports. We are going to be hitting the Masters hard coming up this week, in addition to the NFL. So we will have a Masters pod. We will be breaking down stats. We will everything possible for the Masters. It's a big tournament in the PGA, so you'll want to join us for that. We've got soccer all week. It's a big soccer week. Just obviously with the NFL that takes over, but there's a lot of other sports going on right now. And Nick, before we hop into week 9, let's rewind a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about he's at Nick from CWE. I am at HQ Golf Guy. Nick, whoa, Tommy.
No. I got this weird bacon neck thing going on, so I'm trying to press it out.
I got this today, by the way. My Lakers.
Oh, nice, awesome.
Pretty cool, but so yeah, I got both the Lakers and Dodgers. I'm sky high, and then I've got Michigan football, which knocked me right back down to earth.
Boy, are they terrible! Their defense is fucking garbage. Which is not usually a thing you really deal with until they play Ohio State.
Not to get into it, but Don Brown is just the most stubborn defensive coordinator in the country, leaving guys that don't belong on islands and refusing to change anything.
I mean, they're 40 points given up in both games against teams that aren't exactly powerhouse offenses.
Yeah, it's been Minnesota scored 24, Michigan State didn't.
Oh, was it? Okay, I don't know why I thought it was 4. Minnesota is who's given up 40 points in each game.
Terrible team too. But let's rewind a little bit. We talked a lot of some of those guys there in week 8. Nick, how did we do as a podcast on week 8?
Well, first of all, Brian, is Nick from CW.
One more thing.
Yeah.
You didn't the freshness is gone.
I shave. Well, first of all, I need a fucking haircut. Second of all, I have time to shave Friday afternoon before we leave. So that's what it's become. So I'm at my literal scrubbiest by time we're doing this podcast. That's how much I love everyone.
What did we do on week 8, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, really, really good. Just really good. ROI in football was literally 103%. Just really happy with all of everything that went into how I did my research. And I thought there was a lot of stuff that was obvious to me. I think there was a lot of stuff that I really, really went back and forth on. And I hit 100% ROI without having any Patrick Mahomes, without having any Travis Kelce, who were, I believe, the highest. I don't even know if a tight end did okay outside of Travis Kelce last week. My highest owned tight ends were fucking Irv Smith and Harrison Bryant, who combined for 5 points. So I think it says a lot about, number one, how much money I probably left on the table. But yeah, it was really good. If you listen to the podcast, we talked about the Dolphins defense just being a clear and obvious, coming off of a bye week, $2,400 on DraftKings. What else? The Rams, on a short week, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
All right, let's try that again. I mean, the Rams outgained them by 300 yards. The Rams beat the crap out of Miami last week.
But it didn't matter. The Dolphins
Jared
defense
Goff is terrible. He's terrible.
Oh yeah, Jared Goff is yeah. I mean, and that's kind of how I felt. Jared Goff has constantly been a guy where if once you put him under pressure, it's done. The defense is going to do what they want. That's not to say you're. A literal winning stack last week could have been Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and the Dolphins defense. It's sad and amazing all at the same time. But, I was really big on the Dolphins defense. I just felt seeing other defenses in good positions being that costly. And there have been a lot of people who are way smarter than I am when it comes to like breaking down the stats of football, who just had a lot of content out that my eyes happened to see in regards to like how underrated the Dolphins defense in general has been. And I was just like, at $2,400, where we're really trying to spend down at a position where you could spend $4,900 for this week for the Steelers against the Cowboys, but are they going to outproduce 2x what a $2,400 Minnesota Vikings defense against a Kenny Golladay-less and Matthew Stafford-less Detroit Lions team are going to do? Like, in theory, yeah, they probably are. Most projection models are probably going to say, hell yeah, that's an easy one. There's no question about it. But in reality, all it takes is for, Dalton Schultz to score 2 touchdowns and weird stuff to happen, interceptions at the one that gives Zeke really easy run-ins. There's any amount of things that could cause the Steelers not be able to pay off that price. So we hit on the Dolphins. Darnell Mooney, since week 2, I know we are a small bucket podcast here. Like, we are not getting giant listeners, but I may be the first Darnell Mooney guy. I've been saying it since week 2 of the NFL season. I watched him a lot at Tulane. They somehow awkwardly managed to get themselves on a lot of college football slates. Jayla Mccleskey had transferred there from Oklahoma State, that being one of the real big reasons why I followed that so much, because I was a really big believer in him at Oklahoma State. And so I have been big time on it. And if you look at like box score watchers, like, that's why box score watching is so bad unless you're looking at the wrong things. If you're looking at the right things, you'd see they're taking shots at him downfield. And it's been long known, like, New Orleans against number 2 receivers have been lacking because they put Lattimore on the top guy. And Robinson still had a really good day, don't get me wrong. But at $3,500, like, Darnell Mooney was an easy play for all of my stuff. And then we had Derrick Henry. And, I think – and for me, once I built my lineups, by that morning, I had like 30% Dalvin Cook because he was cheaper than Kamara and Henry. And I was like, people just aren't going to play Cook because he's coming back from an injury, because he's priced right around that range where Henry and Kamara are very clear popular options. You're not going to have all 3. And Kareem Hunt's just below him. So for tournaments, it was like, this is the perfect. And we have a situation like that this week that we can talk about really in the first game, ironically. DK Metcalf was a play that I was all over. Tyreek Hill was a play I was all over. Really, the only reasons I fucked up is because I didn't play good tight ends and I didn't play Pat Mahomes. If I had played those guys, I might have had a shot at taking something down, because everything I played outside of that was pretty much the nuts on FanDuel. And I had an enormous amount of DJ Dallas. Because and even in like a third, my highest dollar contest single entry on FanDuel, it was like Russ, DK, Hill, Kittle, Kittle could have ended up smashing if he didn't get hurt, because those other quarterbacks like to throw to him way more. I had DJ Dallas, I had Dalvin Cook. It was like, it finished super high up in the $33 single entry tournament and could have been a lot better. So I'm hoping that the philosophy that I've undertaken and cash games and playing head-to-heads. I know this is like a long, rattly segment here where I'm doing a lot of the talking, but I can't encourage people enough to play cash games. I mean, again, on a week where people really struggled because so many people were like, hey, the nuts is Jimmy Garoppolo, which is something no one should ever say under any circumstances whatsoever. And, I won like, I played $41, $42, $43 head-to-heads, and I literally won all but 4. So I won 116 out of 120 head-to-heads. And my cash team didn't do tremendous, right? Like, I had Kareem Hunt. I had a shitty tight end. I played Burrow, who was okay. I played AJ Green. He was absolutely terrible, but I still won all of these head-to-heads because I still just didn't play Jimmy Garoppolo, because that's a matchup I didn't care if it mattered or not, because I just have no belief that team is going to like have him succeed, for lack of better terms.
Let me just one quick question for anybody who's watching in advance of tonight's game. The biggest question we're going to get is Dwelly Reed. If Reed is active, how much do you think he plays, and will Ross Dwelly still be the guy there, or do you think you go right to Jordan Reed?
It's 11:40 or 11:54 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday. I've looked at this game zero. I have no idea. I mean, the whole thing is a shit show from the get-go, right? Like, Richie James, probably my favorite option if he plays because I think he's the most talented. But you've got River Craycraft. I mean, it's just insane to consider. But you're right. Mullins, who I'm assuming is Beathard starting because how did it go last time? Was Mullins the starter and then they ended up?
Yeah.
But I wonder. So whoever starts, like they both like throwing to tight ends, right? So there's no question that those guys carry a lot of value. I think we had this situation earlier in the year, and my gut take was Ross Dwelly because, he's been there. He's had some games when Kittle was out, but it was not that way. They were absolutely intent. And if you recall, even before the injury, Reed wasn't playing like an absolute ton, but they still force-fed him the ball. So, I mean, he's probably the option I would look at out of those guys. I think he's more viable for red zone targets, which is way more important than anything else.
Taking a quick look at the PGA leaderboard, I'm going to say Cameron Davis and Scotty Scheffler, the two of the three guys that we picked in the headquarters, are both now in first place, tied in first. So some good work on the PGA side today.
You did mention Scheffler. I unfortunately did not heed the call for Scheffler in my one lineup.
Just trying to keep everyone active and letting everyone know what goes on over there at the DFS headquarters and what we're doing there. We have MMA this weekend too, so a big week if you want to get on board again.
I mean, you're dropping the ball. It's fucking championship weekend in NASCAR. We've got the Pac-12 returning in college football.
Well, college football is an end of the show discussion, right?
Yeah, definitely for sure.
All right.
NASCAR has just been a shit show. Let's not even talk about that.
You want to get to it? We'll get to it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Fantastic game to lead things off. The Carolina Panthers head to Arrowhead. The Kansas City Chiefs. We've got Pat Mahomes at 81, Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 61, Le'Veon Bell at 51, Tyreek Hill at 71, Hardman at 48, Kelsey at 72. On the flip side with Carolina, we've got Teddy at 6, Mike Davis at 67. McCaffrey would be 85 if for some reason a miracle happened and McCaffrey played. Robbie Anderson, 63, Moore at 56, and Ian Thomas at 28. Have we just been dumb for not playing Mahomes if we haven't been playing Mahomes?
So let's talk about that because I think that's actually a really good discussion point. Here's why I didn't play Patrick Mahomes last week, okay? And it makes sense, and then you sit back and you're like, is what happened a 5% likelihood of what happened, or was it a 55 or 65% likelihood of what happened? Because my thought process behind it was this team will score 35 plus points. However, it could be spread out in such a way with Mahomes being the highest priced quarterback on the board that he gets 3 touchdowns and 300 yards, but that's at his price, not necessarily like a slate-breaking performance. The defense could end up scoring touchdowns here. You've got 2 capable backs in Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell. They could capture potential touchdown opportunities from a tired defense, and it just didn't go that way. It was just all Patrick Mahomes. And in hindsight, this is one of those situations where I do, you hear it all the time from analysts, right? Like, oh, if I had to go back and do it differently, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change a thing because the process was right. If I had to go back, I would absolutely do something different. And it's not necessarily just a results-based thing, but it's just sometimes trying to be too smart for your own good and realizing that absolutely with a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes who can drop a dime to any one of his receivers at any time, this was well in the realm of possibilities. So I don't think this is likely to be the rule of what we see out of Patrick Mahomes, but we always have to remember that 40-point upside is there, though most weeks it's probably going to be more between like 28 and 30.
Okay, so then when you take a look at that, So what does that tell us? Does that tell us that maybe he's still not necessarily in every week? What does that tell you?
Yeah, I mean, for one, I think it's as a guarantee a situation where he is never a cash game option unless he's like priced way down because, like, I mean, look, he might be on the surface reliable, but like he's very costly. So again, there's nothing that says if that game was replayed that they don't end up with 2 rushing touchdowns and a defensive touchdown, and all of a sudden he only has 2 touchdowns and he has 22 points instead of 39 points, which makes a huge difference, obviously, right? So I think that's the takeaway is Mahomes is always going to be a great GPP quarterback. It does show that, I mean, I think you probably could have played 3, if not 4 Kansas City receivers and been okay. Literally, it was a week where you could have played any one of their receivers and you would have had a really great week. Tyreek Hill, of course, misses the 100-yard bonus by 1 yard because, of course, that has to happen. But it's a conundrum for this week, right? Because Mahomes is still the highest-priced quarterback. You get a little bit of a price bump out of Tyreek Hill. Travis Kelce's price is absolutely ridiculous. But then you have Bell and you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I feel so bad for Le'Veon Bell. Let's play they're obviously going to get him a touchdown against the Jets.
And that's my thought as well.
And he had like 2 fantasy points, so that really – or he probably had more than that, but you get the gist. It was something that definitely killed you. I think that's where I have some appeal this week is with the running backs. I feel like their prices are low enough, and we know that Carolina has been an absolute sieve to running backs in general. So I think there's a lot of upside there. I don't think you can really consider any of them for cash games because you just don't know how that is going to break. But every single viable option on this team is literally in play for tournaments. There's no question about it.
What about the flip side? Kansas City is going to put up a ton of points. Carolina has, they've been an all right offense in terms of scoring. Is there any interest in Robbie or even Teddy on the flip side or anything, even DJ Moore? We saw Curtis Samuel do some things. Any interest at all in Carolina?
Yes, I have a lot of intrigue behind what is going to happen with Christian McCaffrey here. Mm-hmm. Because he's practicing. They've kind of indicated that it's going to, he's going to go back to what he was doing before, which is going to be the running back on the team. And I don't think you're going to see Mike Edwards spelling him. I don't think this is a situation where Matt Rule is going to use hey, you performed well in his stead, because the last few weeks have been terrible for Mike Davis owners. They've been really bad. Like that shit went from here down here really quick, really fucking quick. So I don't know.
But in a way, doesn't that tell you that maybe they do need to mix in because it's not sustainable to do what Christian McCaffrey does? I mean, maybe
I said that for a whole year and I was wrong every fucking week. So I don't know.
You weren't wrong this year. I mean,
well, he got hurt.
Well, that's when you play 99,000 snaps a game, you're gonna get hurt playing football.
I don't disagree with you at all, but I think we have to get past the idea of like trying to predict when and how it's going to happen. And I don't think that's what we're necessarily trying to do. But my point is, if McCaffrey gets cleared, and I think they kind of said that it's going to, whatever happens in practice this morning is going to go a long way into how the weekend goes. And I admittedly don't pay close enough attention at this point in the year or in this point in the week to know for sure what the likelihood is. But if he plays, I mean, he's the easiest play on the slate for me because you have Dalvin Cook, who's going to get all the ownership after what he did last week. We saw it with, and I laughed out loud at so many like half analysts or half like good players, like actual good players that were like, oh, DK Metcalf had a week this week. I should have been Tyler Lockett. What? Like, that's not how, just because they did good last week doesn't mean they're going to do well this week. There's nothing that says that's how that works, especially with wide receivers and the level of variance they have in as opposed to running backs. But you look at it and you have Dalvin Cook there. Then you have Derrick Henry right underneath him. And yeah, I mean, for the most part, the Bears defense has been reasonably solid, but like those guys are going to get ownership before I think McCaffrey gets ownership. I don't think anyone's going to play him, and McCaffrey has the upside to do what Dalvin Cook did last week, so I don't understand why you wouldn't make him your highest. I don't know that I would say jam him into your cash games, but he would be the first guy I put into my high dollar single entry stuff because I think that people still wouldn't play him. As far as the receivers go, the roles have somehow reversed. Now Robbie Anderson is the low A dot guy, and DJ Moore is getting pushed downfield. And the big wild card in all of this is just Curtis Samuel, and how does that work? Was the Curtis Samuel usage because they were starting to get some ineffectiveness out of Mike Davis, and it was more of a, hey, we need to kind of compensate for that by getting a dynamic playmaker. I don't really know how in love I am with all of those guys. I think all of them have upside to break the slate. And I mean, man, you look at that price on DJ Moore especially, and it just feels like you have so much upside there for a guy at 5.6K. So I like having some players from this game. I think they're all tournament options for me. That's probably where I would leave it.
So as we build our cash game lineups, we're probably going to leave this one out of our cash game lineups.
In the short term, yeah, I think so.
All right. So we move on. Seattle Buffalo, another game that has often some pretty cool fantasy stuff going on in terms of Josh Allen and obviously Wilson and those two wide receivers. When you take a look at this, I'm going to go to the depth charts here. You've got Josh Allen at 7,000. Zach Moss, couple of touchdowns last week at 5,200. Devin Singletary at 47. Diggs at 74. Cole Beasley at 54. Gabe Davis at 32. Over on Seattle, take a look here. We've got, let's see, Lockett is $1,000 cheaper than DJ Metcalf. Metcalf 78. Lockett 68. Not sure about the running backs yet, but Carson at 65. Dallas at 5,000. Hyde at 51. And Russ at 76. I want to start with those two wide receivers. $1,000 difference, Metcalf?
Yeah, if you go back a couple weeks, we talked for a couple weeks consecutively just about how poor Buffalo looked in the middle of the field defensively. They had a couple weeks where A.J. Brown cooked them, Travis Kelce cooked them, and man, this sets up such a good get-right spot for Tyler Lockett. Which sounds funny to say since this guy is coming off 2 weeks ago a 50-plus fantasy point game. But he disappointed a lot of people. I think this is a great opportunity because people are just going to keep jumping back and forth between the wrong Seahawks receiver. I'm going to put my money on on Tyler Lockett this week for sure. I think the price is more than I want to spend, but I can tell you that is a collective feeling every week for every single player in DFS. I wish every single player was cheaper. He's someone that I'm a little vexed about. I think the upside is definitely there, but man, he's shown some games where he gets limited targets, and it's not like he's getting the work, but the touchdown equity is there. It's just he doesn't get the level of targets that some of the other guys in this price range get. I mean, 520. Okay, so the 20 obviously totally repeatable. 525 for 1388. Okay, the 8, 13, 20, that's great, but then you also have 3 games at 5 or under, and that at 6,800. I mean, I just don't feel comfortable. So I think he's probably again still more in the tournament pile. I don't think I like any of the running backs, period. I think both quarterbacks are intriguing, though Josh Allen has looked absolutely brutal the past 4 weeks after getting off to a really, really, really hot start. He has been piss poor for fantasy. Some of those have been pretty tough matchups.
Do you take into account the fact that it is Seattle all the way across the country on the road, and that's typically been a spot where they've struggled over the years?
Yeah, and I think you could look to that. I think you could get some indirect lower ownership on Allen because people are probably frightened about what happened with Jimmy Garoppolo last week, and people make these weird false equivalencies in fantasy sports about why they can't do something. I could definitely see that falling into that basket where people are like, Nope, got screwed over by the guy playing against Seattle last week, not doing it again this week. And we see Josh Allen at 7K go out there and grab 2 touchdowns on the ground and put up 3 more in the air, and he ends up with 38, 40 fantasy points, totally in the realm of possibilities. Buffalo receivers, super interesting spot here. Gotta like Stefon Diggs, but man, that price is, I think he's like the 3rd highest priced receiver on the slate. And I look, the talent's there. He absolutely deserves to be priced there. But again, probably yielding more towards the tournament side of things. Cole Beasley is interesting. I just don't think you have much, and he's purely a DraftKings play as opposed to a FanDuel play. 5,200, I think. There's some merit there in using him. I don't know. I kind of been tossing back and forth about how I'm viewing Gabriel Davis this week. I believe, again, he and Darnell Mooney are like my undercover guys that I feel like could win people money this year. And this sets up really well to be a game that he could really, really do well in, because I think they're obviously going to put attention on Diggs as much as they can. And I think Beasley is going to command more attention than Gabriel Davis is. And they look for this kid in the end zone. They look for him down the field. If Josh Allen has the time and his accuracy is on point, there's no reason we can't see 560 and a touchdown, just like we basically saw from Mooney last week at $3,200. And on a week where, quite frankly, there's a lot of running backs I want to play that are a little more expensive, I don't hate the idea of potentially looking at him as a cash game option.
All right. So, but as we go through and build our lineup, probably skipping this game as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, I was toying around with builds, and I didn't find anything that I absolutely loved to have to force in Davis, but he's probably the guy that I think, would be the one closest to getting in.
Fair enough. The Denver Broncos head to Atlanta to play the Falcons in Atlanta, so there's always a little added fantasy bonus when the game's in Atlanta. Drew Lock at 52, Melvin Gordon at 53, Lindsey questionable at 52, Jerry Jeudy at 47, Tim Patrick questionable at 49, Hamler with the game-winning touchdown last week at 3,400. Noah Fant, not getting a lot of yardage, but he's getting the targets. Those are there at 4,600. On the flip side, Matt Ryan 64, Todd Gurley 62, Julio comes in at 72, Ridley and Gage both questionable. Blake is at 3,000. And Hunter Hurst at 41. The options may be limited for Matt Ryan here, but it is Atlanta. He always seems to throw for 5,000 yards a game, and they lose it. Any love here for our Falcons? I don't think I want. His defense is terrible, but I don't really know what to do with Denver's offense either.
Yeah, so I think a few things. I like to try to pinpoint someone each week who, when I do my model initially, just really pops off the page. And at his price, Jerry Jeudy, for whatever reason, just kind of showed up there for being a pretty good value at the price. Now, I don't think I'm doing anything with that. I think he'd be someone that, as of now, is on my possible tournament radar. I think some people will be tempted to go with Drew Lock in cash this week because he's facing a defense that the perception is they're bad. You do want to try as best as you can in cash to kind of spend down on a quarterback who could possibly get you there. I don't know that I'm there with Locke. I fear that 20 points might be his upside. I don't know.
I agree.
It's kind of in the vein of things I might do if I really feel like I want to go with the 3 running backs I really like this week. We'll see. Honestly, I think that one guy that will absolutely go into my cash game build this week, no questions asked, is going to be Noah Fant. He has seen some additional kind of we've seen an additional emergence of Albert Akui-Bunam a little bit. It was really subdued last week. He only got 1 target, which happened to be a touchdown. But I think that Fant is someone he's popping in air yard models. I think he's a guy who is a safe bet to get us between 8 and 12 fantasy points. And look, tight end sucks. it's been terrible this year. So I don't think in cash games it's really a good strategy to pay up for Travis Kelce most weeks. So that's probably where I'm going to go. Literally everything else on this slate for both teams is really just an up in the air, dependent on injury situation. I don't like playing Julio because you're getting somewhere between like 3 and 45 fantasy points. And it feels like it's always in extremes, right? It feels like you don't get like a nice, you don't get an, you got 18 fantasy points too often. It really feels like it's, okay, he got 6 points, or, oh, he had 37 fantasy points. So that makes him great for tournaments, but I mean, it's not. And then with the Atlanta receivers, if Calvin Ridley is out, okay, maybe you could start looking at like Hayden Hurst. I think he'll be a reasonably popular cash game tight end. Russell Gage is hurt himself with multiple injuries. And if that ends up being the case, I mean, the path here is obviously you're putting 2 or 3 guys on Julio and just letting Brandon Powell, Christian Blake, and Olamide Zacchaeus beat you, right? Like I think, and that's where it becomes tough because any of those guys could do something. But you almost have to pick one and make that your guy, because otherwise you're just going to be taking a bunch of stabs at guys who are more likely to produce like 3 than 20.
I'm watching Brooks Koepka kind of just play golf like me at this moment. I'm not very
good. I hope he turns his shit around before withdrawing. Oh, I'm in the cash. Look at that.
How about that? The Baltimore Ravens, and believe it or not, there are some Baltimore fans who are like, can we find a way to trade Lamar Jackson? And I don't understand it, but that's actual talk coming out of Baltimore, believe it or not. Okay. Sure. Lamar Jackson at 6,900 in my best ball league. I ended up drafting what I think is a pretty good team. I'm sitting in first place right now, but made a big blunder in that I kind of misplaced my last few picks in terms of the timing of them and missed them. And my quarterback is Jared Goff. He's been all right. My only backup quarterback is Robert Griffin III. So Robert Griffin III will be in my lineup in best balls this week. He's at 4,100. Yay. Smart. Mark Ingram, if he plays, is at 48. Gus is at 48. Dobbins looked fantastic last week against Pittsburgh. As did Edwards. He's at 49. Hollywood at 6,000. Snead at 41. And you got Boykin at 32. Mark Andrews kind of sliding a little bit at 48. On the flip side, Rivers at 56. Jonathan Taylor is at 6,000, but it is a lot of people talking about Jordan Wilkins this week at 42.
He's terrible.
Naheem Hines at 44. On the wide receiver side, you've got Hilton questionable at 46, and then nobody else over 4,000. That includes Pascal and Pittman Jr., Doyle and Burton. Burton at 35, and Doyle at 29. Baltimore, maybe. I mean, I'm not going to anybody in Indianapolis, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, so are the rumors of his demise greatly exaggerated is the question we will be asking ourselves about Lamar Jackson. Look, this is what everybody gets for constantly year in and year out mark my words, we will be saying the same shit next year about Russell Wilson. We will be saying the same exact thing when all of a sudden, what do you mean he's not scoring 38 fantasy points a game? Clearly, this guy's a bum. And I know it's been far more than he hasn't scored, 38 fantasy points. He has one game this year over 30, and he has 4 under 20. We also are dealing with a plummeting price. We're dealing with the fact that this team needs to win. Like, I don't think the Browns are terribly good, but I think they have an easy schedule. There's a path to the Browns, like, being the number 2 to the clear number 1 in the division at this point, which is Pittsburgh. This is a brutal matchup, right? This Indy defense is pretty reasonably good. At the very least, they are just fucking are slow as hell, which takes some allure off of the possible upside. I think on this one, and we know that this Ravens team is a team that mostly does want to run at its core, and they don't want to hurt the possibility of having Lamar Jackson, because it is probably a pretty steep decline to Robert Griffin. No offense to your backup, quarterback. But there were concerns about Lamar Jackson coming out of college in terms of accuracy. It didn't look like it as much last year. Some of that looks like it may be rearing its head. I think this is a game I'd look at Marquis Brown, because there's been a lot of rumblings about need to get him the ball, got to put him in better positions. And that's just coach speak for, hey, asshole, throw the ball to this guy because he's the best playmaker we have on our team. So get him the ball. We talked about J.K. Dobbins last week, and it all kind of came to pass. He's really good. So I do, even against a defense like this, I do still have some kind of interest in J.K. Dobbins, who I assume will just go completely overlooked on a week where someone's at his direct price point, I believe, that will carry some ownership. Mark Andrews, tough matchup, very touchdown dependent. Other than that, on the games where he's not scoring 2 touchdowns, he's invisible. Really tough, man. And then, like you said on Indy, I guess you'd want to play their, goal line running back for opportunities to score. So you want to try to get Trey Burton in your lineup, because he's clearly the goal line back for Indianapolis.
Set up perfectly.
I really don't know how I feel about what I actually just said. The price isn't terrible on him, but I also this team is a fantasy wasteland. I really do think so. I mean, he's seen some targets, I guess, but 3 catches for 9 yards without that touchdown, that's a brutal stat line. So he's really only had one salvageable game this year, and I get that the position is really bad, so I don't fault you for it. But yeah, the rest of everybody else is I can do without. I don't think I need to play any Indianapolis players this week.
And if the Ravens decide they want to check to see what RG3 has, this is the week to do it.
There you go.
Houston at Jacksonville, and what could be one of those. It is in Jacksonville, though, so could be one of those sneaky high-scoring games. We've got some quarterback change in Jacksonville, but we'll start with Houston at Desean Watson at 71, David Johnson at 56, Duke at 4, Fuller nearly traded, but they could not come to an agreement in Green Bay at 6,800, Brandon Cooks at 55, Kenny Stills at 3, Cobb questionable at 45. Jordan Akins at 33. In Jacksonville, we'll ask you about Luton here in a second at 49, but James Robinson is all the way up to $7,000. $4,000 for Chris Thompson. Shark is at 52. LaVisca at 42. Cole at 4,000. And I'm not going to worry about the tight ends there in Jacksonville. So 4,900. I mean, could do worse. Nah, not just kidding, right? You can't play Luton this week, can you? Or can you? Houston's not great defensively.
I have thought about this without really digging into stats, because I remember Jake Luton last year at Oregon State, and I feel like he has a similar setup as he did at Oregon State with the roster that he has here, where they have an extremely reliable and talented running back in James Robinson, who this week remains one of my favorite plays on the slate, despite getting a price increase, because the team really wants to use him. And I'm here for a guy who is getting carries on 3rd and 7. Okay, I'm here for that, because it shows you that, yes, that might be stupid, but they have a ton of belief in his ability. So I think that, do I want to play him in cash? I kind of want to, but I kind of feel like I'm being a little ridiculous with that. So he may end up just kind of falling into like one of my top plays outside of that. But back to Luton, I really see this being a case where he goes out there and it's balls to the wall, and it would not shock me at all if he is the highest point per dollar quarterback on a day. Will not shock me at all. And I think that,
Are we talking about a different because we'll go to Tua last week. Tua last week was not good. Let's face it, he didn't throw for 100 yards. Tell me a little bit about who Luton is and why you think that his performance may be different than say what Tua did last week.
And I could be misstating things, so I do apologize. And people might look at me and say, well, he did this in the Pac-12 and that these teams aren't, great defensive teams. But, I mean, who are? They're not the Big 12, first of all. But even in the SEC, we've seen these teams putting up 40 points against each other in the same game. So who is a good defense? Penn State and Ohio State just had a somewhat slugfest. So who is a good defense? It's teams like Iowa is a good defense. That's it. Okay, Iowa. We found our good defense in college football. I believe this kid threw 28-3 last year on a team that was designed a little bit like Jacksonville, where they wanted to use Jamar Jefferson. They wanted to use Artavis Pierce in the backfield to move the ball forward. He had a good, reliable set of receivers. Isaiah Hodgins was an absolute crush spot every week in DFS last year on this team. And you start looking for parallels. He's got guys like DJ Chark, like Keelan Cole, like Laviska Shenault, who can open up opportunities for him. I don't think he does much in the running game. I think he is more of I'm standing right here and passing, but I don't think he's incredibly inflexible. He's not Tom Brady, right? I think there's definitely upside here, and it's a great entry point, which is different than Tua last week because Tua was actually playing against a defense that's not horrible, right?
Well, that's a top defense.
The Rams are far better than the fucking Houston Texans. There's no question about that.
The Rams are one of the best defenses in the league.
It just comes down to the argument we will have, and it's a perfect argument that $4,900 is going to allow you to do a lot. And I don't think that there's a short rope there for him, right? Because they aren't trying to see what they have in Mike Glennon. I don't believe that. So I think he's going to have his opportunities. You don't have to worry about him getting pulled. Question is, Desean Watson to me seems like the nut cash game quarterback of the week at $7,100. And sure, that's $2,200 more than you're getting with Luton, which really means you are giving up. It's the difference between playing let's say, a risky-ish Deontay Johnson and possibly playing Stefan Diggs in your cash games, who we feel far more comfortable about, or going to Tyler Lockett, who we feel far more comfortable about this week. But again, I see the likelihood of possibility with Watson having 28 to 32 points and Luton having 15 to 18 being the most realistic outcomes there. So I don't know. I think I'd still probably lean Desean Watson. I think in this game, like I said, I like Robinson. I don't hate David Johnson. He's an okay tournament play. Will Fuller is always going to be in play. All of the receivers for Jacksonville, because who the hell knows who's going to be the flavor of the week there. It's just not going to be the tight end. So then it really comes down to, if you're playing Deshaun Watson, do you stack him? And I'm just saying, as of now, my plan, I think, is to play Deshaun Watson. As a note, 0 times this year has the person I've said on this podcast actually been who I ended up playing, because things change so much that, last week it was I went from Burrow to Russell Wilson to David Carr to, well, it's windy as shit in Cleveland, so I'm going back to Russell Wilson to Joe Burrow. That all happened within 3 days. So who knows who I –
and all stuff that obviously when you join the headquarters, we talk about in our chat after.
Right.
But
so I think with the increase in targets this past 5 weeks, it's really, really tough to not just stuff Brandon Cooks in the cash game lineup with Deshaun Watson. I mean, this is a guy, I know you're wincing, but I mean, in the last few weeks, he's had 9, 9, 12. That's a lot for 5,500.
O'Brien effect?
What's that?
Is that the O'Brien effect?
Some of it could be. Some of it has to just be hey, Brandon Cooks is a good football player. And I mean, I know he's had histories with concussions and things like that have really kept him from reaching like prime real estate specifically with the Rams. But I think the talent's there and they know that. And at 5,500, I mean, he's a meaningful savings off of Will Fuller, who I still think is probably the higher upside play. But I do think the realm of possibility is that, you know, you could see 660 and a touchdown from Cooks. And I think at that price, that's a really, really good value. Plus, we know there's upside for 8 for 100 plus and 2 in there as well.
And one more thing I'll say about Luton is that it seems like, unlike a lot of teams that have to go to a backup quarterback and don't seem very excited about it, Jacksonville seems somewhat excited about having the opportunity.
Did I mention that? I forget. I thought I mentioned, but I'm an idiot, so it's super hard to know for sure if I said the things I thought I said or not. But I thought the stat I saw on him was he was like had a 28-3 touchdown to interception ratio.
Mentioned that.
Did I say? Yeah, so like that's important though, because it shows. And look, is there a perfect correlation from college performance to NFL performance? Absolutely not. We've seen it again and again and again that doesn't exist. But it does show you that it's a guy who's probably like careful and decisive in the decisions he makes, and isn't going to rush things that much just to try to make something happen. Which is biggest. Basically, that's the biggest complaint I think of anything with Minshew is he forced things to try to happen.
So when we look at our cash game lineup so far, we've got Desean Watson at 71 at quarterback, Brandon Cooks at 55 at wide receiver, Noah Fant at 46 at tight end. That leaves us with all the positions left, a couple of running backs, a couple of receivers, a flex and defense with $5,400 left. So we will we'll keep that train going here as I open back up the well, I don't want to do that. What is this machine doing here on me here? All right, now let's go forward here to a COVID game. The Detroit Lions could be without, and I'm going to stress that again, could be without Matt Stafford. Chase Daniel would be the guy there at 4,000 if that were the play. DeAndre Swift at 5. Carry-on and Adrian Peterson both at 4. Galladay is not going to play at 6,400, so do not play him. Jones at 51 did all right last week, 3,700 and 3,800 for Amendola and Hall. Hawkinson questionable at 51. This could just be a complete disaster. And I know what you're saying. I know what you're going to say already, and I'll let you say it in a second here. But with Minnesota, you've got 62 Cousins, Cook all the way up to 82, Thielen at 67, Jefferson at 61, Irv Smith at 29. And Nick, I'm not going to let you say it. I'm going to say it. Play the Minnesota defense, right?
Yeah, I mean, these $2,400 defenses the past season have just been a godsend, right? We had the Dolphins, we had the fucking Washington football team before that. We've had multiple instances where you could just play dog shit in theory defenses that just happen to be in good spots and they perform. That's probably what I'm going to do this week. If Stafford is out, you're telling me Chase Daniel and Marvin Hall and Marvin Jones and a banged up TJ Hawkinson in we can't figure out exactly what we want to do with DeAndre Swift yet led team is threatening. Like, I do think the Minnesota defense is probably more towards bad than good. I don't think any of us are debating that, but this feels like it could be a get right spot with this team at home against a team playing a quarterback. Like, I don't think Chase Daniel is like absolutely garbage terrible, but I also think it's a huge step back not having Kenny Golladay. It's a huge step back not having Matthew Stafford. So yeah, I don't love I mean, I guess if you want, you can take shots on some of these guys on the Detroit side of the ball and hope that you pick the right one. But I don't know. My takeaway is that I'm never playing Kirk Cousins, basically. There's not someone that really falls into the spectrum of a guy I get too excited about. Great spot for Dalvin Cook. No questions asked. I'm hoping people look at what he did last game and are just like, no, that's not repeatable. And is it? I mean, probably not. But he's still, even last year, we've hit on this multiple times that he was like neck and neck with McCaffrey in terms of production from a fantasy standpoint up until he got hurt last year. Why that would change all of a sudden now, I just don't see it being the case. This team just wants to force feed him the ball. This is a great matchup. Outside of that, I think I would pivot to Adam Thielen in tournaments. I think he is a guy that I'm kind of like looking at and feel like this could be an interesting week for him. But yeah, Minnesota defense, Dalvin Cook, double stack. I think that could be a winning combination of both cash and GPPs.
So as we take a look now at our cash lineup once again, we've added Cook, we've added the Minnesota defense, and that leaves us one running back, 2 wide receiver spots, and a flex, all with $5,500 as an average player salary remaining. We are, Nick, I'm sorry to tell you, there are still 2 more 1 o'clock games.
I know
that's your thing. Let me just tell you, the excitement over this next one. The New York Giants and your Washington football team. Okay, let me ask you this question first. Do we care? Yes or no?
about this game.
In fantasy, DFS.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Well, there's some games where you'll sit here and you'll go, I'm not interested in talking about this game. I kind of thought maybe this would be one of them.
Yeah, this is one of those games that strikes me as either we're going to have a really awkward defensive battle where they somehow – we know Washington's front 7 are good. Like, they're good. It's the rest of these bums that aren't very good. And then
is it Alfred Morris that you're looking forward to playing this week?
No, but I mean, we've seen a rash of freshman running backs coming out after their bye week and just really finally getting it done. But at the end of the day, like, we've already seen Antonio Gibson do that twice. So I at 5,800 again, 4% owned. Okay, I'll take a rested team going again. And this is another really good spot for the Washington defense. This is the same spot effectively Miami was in last week, where it's a team coming off a bye that has an underrated defense going up against a team coming off a short week who has some pretty strong question marks on offensive line and whose quarterback could very easily get rattled and can't even run down the field without tripping and falling. I wanted to do the Daniel Jones running down the field, tripping and falling meme with Donald Trump's chances of maintaining his presidency. Looks good. Not so good.
The meme is Buda Baker running and DJ Metcalf
coming
up.
That's a good one too.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm proud of us. It went 51 minutes and 52 seconds before talking about that mess. I'm gonna leave it at that. Daniel Jones at 54 is the quarterback. Gallman at 45. Darius Slayton at 5. Shepard questionable. Shark at 48. Golden Tate at 37. Evan Ingram at 43. You mentioned Gibson at 58. Kyle Allen at 53. Terry McLaurin at 65 with no one else over 3,300 there. Logan Thomas questionable at 37, but he's been a part of it, and he's another guy that could probably come out of that bye week with some game plan if he does indeed play. I guess my question is, you talked about it. It's a fantastic point about the rookie running backs coming off a bye and really getting involved in the offense again. You mentioned Gibson being that kind of guy, but already having a few really good games. And pardon me for not. I was watching Brooks Koepka get a birdie. I was shocked. I apologize. Antonio Gibson, did you say tournament player? Or are you even considering him in cash?
I mean, I don't think it's realistic to consider him in cash, especially. Oh, he didn't get a birdie. It shows he's still +3 for me.
No, he just. I'm actually watching it. So.
Oh, good. That's probably better than this app. All right, good. So maybe he'll make the cut. All right. Anyway, yeah, I at 5,800, I think there's some guys we're going to be spending up, and there still is that uncertainty how often are they going to try to use Peyton Barber at the goal line? How often are they going to drop in J.D. McKissick into the pass catching role? So I don't think it's something that he's sealed up for himself yet. Terry McLaurin may end up being like the best play on the slate that nobody ends up talking about because, again, it's a guy coming off of a bye week. It's just natural to get excited about players that you've seen over the past few, the last week and trying to predict what's going to be the progression for them, that it's super easy for a $6,500 Terry McLaurin to get lost in the shuffle when in reality, he probably has the highest rate and likelihood of, breaking a tournament open because he's getting a ton of attention, no doubt about it. So, yeah, I mean, I think that it's a really good spot. I would use him in cash games. I don't think if we're building live on air, we're using him in this one, but he is a guy I definitely would surely consider as being a cash game viable play.
When Alfred Morris came onto the field Monday night. I did not realize Alfred Morris was still in the league. I heard the name Alfred Morris and thought, did he have a son that came and decided to play some NFL football? No price. He's not in the player pool right now.
Oh wow! Well, I wouldn't have played him anyway. So
well, no
harm to foul.
I'm really
Wayne Gallman doesn't look terrible. I mean, he's not that bad. He really isn't. He's not Saquon Barkley, but $4,500. Like, the only thing obviously stopping me from doing that is I think that the matchup is kind of brutal.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like that. Maybe it's not. And again, Alfred Morris is there, and it's 3 running backs because they're putting Dion Lewis on the field, so it just makes it tough. So I don't know. That's basically my take. I agree with you. I kind of think Logan Thomas could be there. Maybe this could be the Evan Ingram game, but I think that could be something we end up saying for all of 2020.
Chicago to Tennessee, the final 1:00 game on the slate. Looks like it's going to be some good weather there in Tennessee with the sun shining. And the sun's been shining on Ryan Tannehill quite a bit this year. 6,300 for him. Derrick Henry's at 79, under 8,000 for Derrick Henry. Brown, I mean, at what point do you just look at Brown and go, okay, he's actually just really that damn good? He's at 6,600. Davis coming around as well at 59. Jonnu is at 39. Nick Foles at 55. David Montgomery at 57. Allen Robinson at 69. Mooney at 39. Jimmy Graham questionable with a couple of different injuries. May not be too serious, though, at 38. You mentioned Mooney. Is that a guy we're looking at this week in our cash lineup?
Cash, it's the price has come up. So there's a couple of things that kind of, stop me, as I think you have Gabriel Davis in just as good of a spot. And mind you, that's if John Brown misses. If John Brown plays, Davis is off the field quite a bit more. So I think that he's viable because he's getting enough targets. He's got to be averaging like 5 or 6 targets at under 4K. He's seeing some meaningful looks downfield that if Foles can actually connect with him, let's say Foles had actually hit him on that 51-yard pass last week, it wasn't a touchdown, but it would have given him like 9 extra fantasy points, and he would have been in absolute takedown smash territory at that point. So based off of the looks that he's getting and where they're occurring, I think that he's viable.
Not for what we're doing, though, right?
Probably not. And I'm not trying to build an entire lineup because I'm not trying to give someone an entire lineup because then I don't want kicked off at DraftKings for, giving away lineups. But, me personally, Derrick Henry coming off a bad game last week where he only had 113 yards and a touchdown. Apparently that's a qualification to get your price dropped. This is actually another solid matchup. I do think the Bears mostly have been hurt more by receiving backs, but we did see Darrell Henderson have a good game against them a couple weeks ago. Will Henry carry lower ownership? I think he'll carry lower ownership this week than last, but I think it's
Cook, right? I mean, the Henry ownership's just going to slide just a little bit to Dalvin Cook.
I'm wondering how many people are just doing both, and that's just how you start. Like, hey, we know these two are going to get the ball. Like, Cook's going to get 20 touches, but they're going to be like the equivalent of a normal person's 28 touches, and Henry's going to touch the ball 25 times, and that could be good for anywhere from 80 to 350 yards. Just depends on how Chicago feels like playing. So I think that's a strategy I've thought about. I don't know if I'm going to do it or not. If I was playing Luton, that's probably the strategy I would go is just grab Luton and play those two and just be good with it. AJ Brown's in the cash discussion because, like you said, I mean, he's just really good. He had a bad game last week and had 13 fantasy points. Other than that, I don't know. Like Allen Robinson, he could be fine in this matchup. I think it's something that it's definitely in the realm of possibilities. Just don't really love his price compared to some of the other guys. I don't know, and it's always stomach churning to play anybody that plays for the Bears.
So when we go through we'll leave. What we'll do is we'll pick 6 of the 9 guys. Let's do that. Let's just that's not the. Let's face it. This is not the cash lineup that we're going to be probably promoting.
Right.
when Saturday comes around anyway. Let's pick 6 of the 9 guys. We've got Watson, Cook, Cooks, Fant, and the Vikings defense. Let's find a cheap wide receiver somewhere if that's something that we can do.
We might go a different route, and I think it's going to be in this game. So we can do. There's 2 players left that I think I would possibly be considering as of right now in cash games.
Okay, so we go to the Las Vegas Raiders and the LA Chargers. Yeah, the LA Chargers. God, that's disgusting. Get out of my city. Justin Herbert at 6,800 for the Chargers. Justin Jackson at 49 seems to have taken over that role. Even Pope, although he got hurt a little bit, seemed to be almost favored over Josh Kelly there late in the game this week. Kelly at 44. Keenan Allen's just been fantastic at 7. Williams at 51. Guyton at 31. Hunter Henry at 4,000. The Raiders, that's an interesting thing. Carr at 57. Is there any player in the league who may not be as good as the opportunity he's presented as Josh Jacobs at 6,300? Ruggs is just, you can't use Ruggs at 49. You can't use Aguilar at 47. Hunter Renfrow at 41. I'm not really sure you can use any of those guys. Darren Waller is at 58. I watched Josh Jacobs. I have him in my season long. He's my RB1. It's not going well. Other than having Mahomes and Hill, that's going well. But I sit here and watch this guy at the 1 yard line. He can't score touchdowns. I'm kind of frustrated with Josh Jacobs, 6,300. Any interest in him this week?
Yeah, Jacobs actually popped pretty heavily in my model. I actually, strangely enough, think he could be cash game viable.
Okay.
If you honestly, God, it's super.
There, no question. 30 carries a week.
It's super early, but we're halfway through the season, right? But his home road splits are just stupid. It's 13-point difference between home road splits, which is weird. But he has played infinitely better on the road. If you believe that's a thing, then this is a week to fire off, because this Chargers team is clearly fucking inept. They are now the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the seasons were the Falcons. Now we've entered a territory where the Broncos get to 24, 30-point leads and then just feel like tossing their ass up in the air and getting fucked by whoever is playing them. So, yeah, there's a lot of appeal here. I don't know about Derek Carr. I don't think you need to do that this week. I actually think this is a good bounce-back spot for Aguilar. But is Aguilar more reliant? I think he's – let me look at the injuries here. So, if Bryan Edwards comes back, I think that eats into Aguilar a little bit. If he doesn't, I think that Aguilar probably still has some upside there at 4.7. I think this is a better week all around for all of the receiving options, because they're not going to be playing in that terrible weather that they had in Cleveland. Nothing that I'm still super wild about. Waller is going to be a cash game consideration every week. On the flip side of the ball, Justin Herbert's good. He's appearing like he's going to be a very good fantasy producer. I don't give a shit if he's a good NFL quarterback or not, because I only play daily fantasy. I don't play real life NFL anything.
You don't?
No, I don't care about that. I don't need to. It never mattered to me in any sport if anyone's actually good.
That would explain our ratings. If you were an NFL star, people would watch this show.
Oh, fuck, that's my bad. Maybe I'll try that in the offseason. I think Justin Jackson. So coming into this week, as soon as I opened things up, I was like, okay, Troymaine Pope is going to be the guy that I talk about on the podcast, because I do feel kind of similar to you that maybe they're souring a little bit on just
Joshua
Kelly right now. And I could be completely wrong, because he still had touches. But, man, Troymaine Pope fits way better than either of those guys into the Austin Eckler role.
He's a mini Eckler, right? It's what he is.
And so that's kind of why I thought that, is that I think the team, once they discovered that last week, it wouldn't shock me too much if he saw more work, period, this week if he plays. So, I don't know, and I could be dead ass wrong on this one. I'm gonna be 100% upfront and honest. I could be way wrong in telling people that a 4K Troymaine Pope is a good play in either format, because there are still 2 backs there. But I do think teams more naturally want to try to find direct replacements in playing style. so that they don't have to change what they do on offense too much. So he's really interesting. But Josh Kelly, based off of the touches he's been getting, now, mind you, it's really only been 1 week of good production. It may be 2, but there was a week in between that was just really, really, really bad.
It doesn't sound like a Josh Kelly fan in the background.
Oh, that's my son. He's trying to break into the office. No, he's not a Josh Kelly fan, clearly. But I don't know. It's just a tough situation where I feel like any of these guys could very easily be a trap, and which is why I would much rather not take on volatility at the running back position, because there's plenty of spots at running back that you could go to that don't have the volatility. So Jackson could be an option at 4.9. I think we're going to bypass that for now. Keenan Allen is in play. Hunter Henry's probably in play. Everyone else is just a maybe this is the week this guy does it for the Chargers.
That was the first 4 o'clock game. The second one is an option where if you don't want to play the Minnesota defense for any reason, say Stafford comes back, hello, Arizona. That's a defense you may want to consider. Just because, Tua's – everyone's, Tua this, Tua that. He was terrible. Tua was not good. He was not good. Kyler Murray at 7,800. Kenyon Drake is not going to play. Chase Edmonds will be at 68. Benjamin will be at 4,000. Expect to see a couple of carries out of him. DeAndre at 82. Kirk at 53. Fitzgerald at 38. On the flip side, we've got Tua at 55. So here's the issue. We talk about the Miami Dolphins running backs. We know Gaskin is out. Breida, shocker, may not play because he's hurt. They're talking about him maybe not playing. So then you've got, welcome back Jordan Howard, Patrick Laird. You got Bowden Jr. You've got Washington, who just came to the team, cannot play because of the COVID situation. So you're really looking at Howard and Laird if Breida does not go. Arizona defense, one more time. Devontae at 52, Preston Williams at 41, Gesicki, who's just been invisible at 44. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think so. It's really tough to look at this Dolphins team and be like, hey, I want to play this guy. I'm not playing any of these running backs. You got to be fucking kidding me.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that's happening. There's no shot. If I was going to do anything, I'd play Lynn Bowden at flex and just hope that everyone else was so bad that they were like, fuck it, we're just going to – because at least you're only spending $3K, right? He's not a running back. They have him listed at wide receiver. So you can get a starting or a running back at $3K at the wide receiver position. I'm not advising doing it, but that's how I feel about this backfield, that I would rather do that than actually invest in one of their actual running backs. I don't want anyone from this team. There's no way.
And the Miami defense, we were so high on last week, not this week. Kyler Murray is not Jared Goff.
It's a completely different thing altogether. You can rattle him, but he's just going to run away.
Mm-hmm. Unlike Jared Goff, just curl the ball, cry, and throw the ball away to the defense or fumble, which is what
exactly. Threaten to sue the opposing defense.
$100 million well spent.
Yeah.
Good God, they're not going to be able to get out of that contract. On Arizona's side, though, really like Kyler this week. I think in tournaments, I do anyway, personally. No one cares what I think as much. And then Christian Kirk. And I think that Chase at 68 is probably going to get a lot of play. Probably a good tournament play as well.
Yeah, I don't hate the idea of either Kyler or Chase Edmonds in cash. I'm a little bit concerned that they could potentially vulture each other more than Drake, even though I think Edmonds is a more natural pass catcher, which is weird because that's what Drake really excelled at Alabama. But that's clearly not how teams envision him in the NFL, apparently, or at least not this year in Arizona. I just have this really – and Kyler's 7.8. That's a steep price. Now you're talking he's got to really – it does make me a little uneasy now that we're installing who I think many people believed even coming into the season was a better back, in Chase Edmonds. Little worried about DeAndre Hopkins. I know that I think he's been, lightweight banged up over the last couple of weeks. There's no injury designation or anything right now. Sure, upside is definitely there. Just makes me a little concerned with kind of like the emergence of Kirk. Eventually, at the beginning of these games, when every single first or second drive, they try a 75-yard shot down the field to Andy Isabella. Eventually, one of those things is going to land. and it's going to reduce the overall upside for a very expensive DeAndre Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
So I just can't get there in cash games, but in tournaments, he's going to be an elite play. Kirk is an elite play. I will still continue to roll out a few Isabella lineups, even in 20 entry max, like 1 or 2 a week, just because literally all it takes is him to catch one 60-yard touchdown, and that's enough to probably, like, he's going to get maybe a catch or 2 outside of that, and he's going to end up with 15 or 16 points. That's going to be fine. And there's always the upside that they do it more than once, and he can end up just absolutely breaking the slate.
He's at 3,200, by the way, Isabel. I did not mention that earlier. The final game on the slate is going to be in Dallas. Pittsburgh, the Steelers going to Texas. I'm trying to take a look at what I thought was an interesting situation with the wide receiver core here in Pittsburgh. We'll talk about that in a minute, though. Ben at 65, James Conner at 69, Juju is at 62, Deontay at 5, Claypool at 57, Ebron at 45. Washington at 3,000, McLeod at 3,000. But on the flip side, you've got DiNucci at 48, Andy Dalton, just in case, is at 52. We'll mention that. Elliott, questionable at 66, 4,000 for Pollard. Cooper at 56, Gallup at 4,000. And we'll talk Gallup because Gallup got a ton of looks last week. CeeDee Lamb at 49, Dalton Schultz at 36. We'll start with Pittsburgh. The wide receivers, it's awfully hard to know. There's 5 of them that play and 5 of them that get the ball.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of concern because I don't know. I thought I read somewhere that Deontay Johnson left the game again.
Yes.
Okay, so this complicates things like tremendously, right? Like, I don't know how long he left the game.
Should be good to go, though. Should be good to go.
But the more of the point is, we talked about it last week, where as much as I got a lot of stuff right, I really was emphatic about telling people that, Deontay Johnson is the clear number 1, and then it's everyone else behind him, and there is no rotation with Claypool and Washington. And then you see Claypool has 9 targets and a touchdown, and I have not gotten the time to actually go back and look to say, okay, Johnson missed this chunk of the game, and that's why Claypool had that, versus no, he was only out like a series and then he was back in.
It was because they were getting the ball to Claypool.
Okay,
fair enough.
Yeah. So I'm still inclined to say that it doesn't make sense that this guy would have that many targets over the 3 healthy weeks that he had and just not be the guy that they want to go to. And at 5K, I'm way more interested in playing him than anyone else on this team. Again, we can have arguments back and forth, not you and I, but, just people in general about.
Let's go.
Yeah. So I just don't see.
I think
it's at 5K. It's just, for me, it's just hard pressed to feel like why you can't play Johnson in cash this week. Like we were talking about a cheap receiver. That's a guy who you can slot in there. And look, if Ben is really wanting to look to Deontay Johnson, which we have a solid sample size of games when he is healthy that he does, you're not going to get a much better situation than this, right? Like this is one of those, someone on this team is catching 10 passes for 115 yards and 1 to 2 touchdowns. I'm more inclined to try to go with the guy who's done it 3 times already and who is also the cheapest out of the people who has done it, for what reason I don't know. I know people want to believe in Chase Claypool. I'm not even saying Chase Claypool isn't a good play, but I'm just saying, again, like it really feels like it's likely that Johnson would be the guy that I would lean toward there. No shot in hell I'm playing the Pittsburgh defense unless you're expecting them to score 25 points. I don't quite understand. And just so we are clear, again, as bad as Dallas is, this is a situation that Steelers can't actually game plan for because we don't know who's playing quarterback. We know it's not Dalton. We know it's not Dak. We know it's not Ben DiNucci. So it's either Cooper Rush or
Gilbert.
Or Garrett Gilbert, who actually was decent as the Browns whatever thing, 3rd string, 5th string, better than Baker Mayfield string. I don't know. But there's no tape that they're going to look at and be like, okay, we have meaningful – with Andy Dalton, you could game plan a lot because you've got years worth of it. They don't have – it's a good defense. It's a terrible offensive line at this point. It's a terrible football team at this point, but you're not going to have many situations where you convince me that of almost 5K defense is the route you should go, especially in cash games. I'm not doing it. I'm not buying it.
So yeah, DiNucci, it looks like is it has to be Gilbert. I mean, that would, I'm just trying to look. Sorry, I'm trying to look up some stuff here. Would imagine that it has to be at least Garrett Gilbert getting that initial look for. So
Dallas. I thought it was Rush because I think Rush has been in that system a little bit longer, but who knows?
Okay. It doesn't matter. We're not playing him anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Neither one of these guys are in play for the same fucking price as Jake Luton.
Rush doesn't have it. I'm looking at it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see a price for Rush anyway.
Yeah, he's there. He's the same price as Gilbert.
Okay, just not in my.
They're both 48. So okay. One more thing. I mean, Ebron. Hey, he's a guy who could possibly use. Connor. He gets work, but he just doesn't seem to be able to put up those like slate breaking performances. So I guess to some degree he would make sense for cash because I think he's going to get you 15 to 20 points. But it's not. It just feels like I'm going to find the money to get to guys who are highly likely to go over 25 points and a guy who might get to 25 points, you know?
So really quick, breaking it down, we kind of do – this is what we do in the headquarters. We offer our sheet, our big sheet that comes out with the plays of the week in the NFL. And what we do is we offer what's called a head start. So we kind of give you a little bit of a head start, the guys that we think you should play in your cash and even smaller single entry contests. And in that case, we will have that up. Either typically it's up Friday night or sometimes Saturday. We just broke it down right here. Nick has Desean Watson and Dalvin Cook with Brandon Cooks, Deontay Johnson, Noah Fant, and the Vikings. That leaves a running back spot, a wide receiver spot, and a flex spot. There were $5,700 in average per player. So that is where we are with that. Nick, appreciate your time, man. It's been a.
We're not even going to talk about Dallas.
Oh my God! About who?
Dallas.
No. You want to talk about Dallas? What do you want? You Gallup?
I mean, well, first of all, it's not even going to be the same guy under center.
It's going to be a guy who can't throw the ball.
But I think there could be some viability in Dalton Schultz. Number one, right. He's 3,600. I can see either one of these limp dicks throwing the football, trying to just get it out of their hand as quick as possible. And so who does that probably benefit? Well, if you look at the team, it's going to benefit one of CeeDee Lamb or, Schultz. Then I think you have to take a close look a little bit at Ezekiel Elliott and just ask yourself, he's 6,600. At 6,600, no one's playing him. Everyone has given up on Zeke. They look awful. Pittsburgh has confusingly actually given up some decent games to guys like J.K. Dobbins, to guys like Miles Sanders. It's not in the DNA of the team for that to be how you beat them, but that doesn't mean that it will absolutely go that way. And at $6,600, now all of a sudden you're looking at one of the best running backs in the game of football needing to do less to actually pay off his price. So this is not like a salary play by any stretch of the imagination, or this is not a cash game play by any stretch of the imagination, but it is one of those things where, like,
is it?
It's either one of what it is. It's one of two things. Okay.
But you've almost convinced me to the point where it may be a cash game play. Why wouldn't it be? $6,600 is less than James Robinson. We've got $5,700 left in our cash game lineup. At $6,600, that allows us to play a decent flex and a decent receiver.
I mean, it could be, sure. I don't think, but I just, I'm just not doing it because, and part of the reason is if he's not having success, I do think you will start to see them put in Tony Pollard way, way, way more because they're going to just say, this is done. We're going to just try to save the legs for next year. Let's get Pollard out there. Let's showcase Tony Pollard, who's extremely talented, that we could possibly trade and get, more assets for. And he's got to be on a good enough contract money-wise that teams would be interested to give up something for him because he's not a huge cap hit. But like I said, I think there's some merit into taking that route. He could be a falling knife. You know what I mean? That you try to catch and you just end up slicing your hand open. Or it could be the week that he manages to break off a couple of long runs that end up as touchdowns, and he's got 28, 30 fantasy points, and you have him at 2.3% ownership because everyone knows that the vaunted Pittsburgh Steelers defense never in the history of the NFL has a bad football team gone up against a good defense and had success, except all the fucking time.
I didn't want to play Derrick Henry against Pittsburgh, and I was kind of right there.
I mean, you weren't wrong, but it was a game in the second half where if they were able to do the same stuff in the first half, Henry would have had 152 scores. The game could have been entirely different, but it's just the difference. Tennessee is a good team. Dallas at this point is not a good team. So that's why we are saying let's take shots in tournaments and not burn a cash game spot, because I do think in cash games, James Robinson, we have entered the point where undrafted free agent of the Jacksonville Jaguars, James Robinson, is probably a better cash game play than Ezekiel Elliott for all the reasons that we talked about. Robinson's more active in his offense at this point than I think Zeke is.
I do have Robinson in my best ball, so that's
good. So
all right, we're at a minute 20 here. Let's spend some time talking about college football. You want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, last week was actually a really good week for me. I did not manage to cash on the late night slate due to my own ignorance, but it's really tough. Like when you're playing those 2 or 3 game slates and these teams have like 3 and 4 running backs, if you just miss on that a little bit, it's just you're done because there's only so many players. But other than that, I had a really, 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 really good week. Again, I didn't end up I ended up going against the grain and playing only one quarterback instead of playing 2 quarterbacks, which a lot of people just pitch absolute fucking fits about, thinking that you have to play. But it didn't make sense. We had a bunch of good running backs between ETN, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams. They were just, and I didn't play ETN. I ended up playing someone else who had a really big game. And then there was a $3K or $3,800 King Henry something or other from Vanderbilt who ended up having a big game. Long story short, I ended up having a really, really, really good slate. Afternoon slate went really well. So hopefully we can continue that moving into this week. We get Pac-12 coming back. Some really good news there is that they just didn't price any of the Pac-12 guys up at all. So you can get good players like Jaden Daniels, even though there might be some rain in that game, at like 62 or 64. Frank Darby isn't priced where he should be. Brent Kuth, who's a reasonable tight end for Utah, who they were using a lot at 5K. I don't think you have Muhammad Ibrahim, who had 41 carries last game at 10K. And he's a decision point. A lot of people, I haven't really heard or seen any college football content yet. I'm sure a lot of people are really going to try to kind of talk up the fact that you can't play a 10K running back. I assure you that prices are soft enough this week that you can absolutely play a 10K running back, but you just have to understand that 10K running back probably needs to pay off like 35 fantasy points. And he did it last week. He had like 4 touchdowns and 200 yards. Still wasn't the top running back in the game. He had 200 rushing yards, and 4 touchdowns in. A lot of value out there. Zach Evans from TCU, 4K against an inept Texas Tech defense. There's a lot of routes to go this week. I think this should be a fun week. I don't think they've released the night and late night slates yet. So, and we had a successful night last night too, in the room, just playing some action. Both Snoop and I had some good skeleton lineups that if we had just had one different move, we would have been in the takedown realm. So as always, I will have content posted for college football on usually I'm going to do all the slates. So throughout the day, like it's not going to be posted all at once, but I'll have stuff posted throughout the day. We'll be keeping up with injury news, weather concerns, COVID, anything like that.
Awesome. So once again, we are going to offer those. We're not going to give you the details on here. We want you to kind of reach out to us and really show you're interested in kind of the process of what we do here. If you DM Nick, if you DM me, we will have a deal on the DFS headquarters access that you will enjoy. It'll be well worth your time to reach out to us on Twitter. Send us a DM, send us a regular message. Doesn't matter. We'll reach out and Again, it's the Eat the Chalk podcast brought to you by the DFS headquarters. We've got some great stuff going on. The NASCAR Championship, as Nick talked about, we've got the biggest golf tournament of the year that's been pushed back to November happening this week. We've got an MMA thing. We've got soccer all week. It's going to be a big week for us here at the DFS headquarters. You can get in and get a special deal. Reach out to Nick, myself. Nick, thanks so much for your time this week. Appreciate it. We will see you next week, and maybe we'll try to get you on our Masters podcast early next week.
Sounds good.
Take care, guys. We'll see you.